to order. We'll start with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone. We will start, as usual, with review and signing payroll and accounts payable. For the last pay period, we had payroll in the amount of $34,373.21. We had accounts payable in the amount of $28,059.92. We had 14.5 hours of police department overtime, 3 hours of fire, and 0 highway. I don't know if we have any explanation for police. Is there anything different that went on?
Not that I'm aware of, but I can double check.
Might just be coverage. We had no ACH payments of any kind. I think you're all set. Thank you so much.
Yep.
See you later.
You're welcome.
Night.
Next, I'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I'm going to abstain because I wasn't present. What's included in tonight's consent agenda is the public minutes from 10:03, the rec manifest, the treasurer's report, and building permits. There you go. Next, we will open it up to public comment. As usual, if anyone in the public would like to comment on an agenda item or any other topic, please feel free. Come up, if possible, up to the table here so that the microphone on the end can pick you up for the recording. Letty, you can wheel right over.
That's where I'm in the front. Letty Bedard, Middle Road, speaking on behalf of myself and not as a member of any board that I happen to be on. I have a couple things. I haven't been here in a couple weeks. The big one is I obviously injured myself, or better just tell everyone, I broke my right ankle and sprained my left one. I'm fine, I had the operation, still non-weight bearing for another 4 weeks, but I'm good. The EMTs that came to get me from the fire station were fantastic. The one thing that was challenging is the only pain medication they could offer me was over-the-counter Tylenol, because that's all they have. I guess there are other things that EMTs of a certain level of certification can give, but they don't have them. And so I was wondering if you could look into funding those other things. Apparently it's something called nitrox, which is like what they give at the hospital when you have a baby. It's like a nitrous oxygen mixture, which would have been fantastic to have as a choice.
Historically, Karen, who makes those sort of decisions when it comes to like what's stocked on EMT rigs?
Alyssa Sanuski, the captain, she would make those determinations based off of the certification.
So we can
of-
certainly have that
I just
discussion.
didn't know because there is probably going to be a financial, it's going to cost money to do
Sure.
it, so I figured I'd check here first. That is all.
Okay.
Thank you.
That was it? You said you had a couple things.
The only other thing, but it was from a couple weeks ago, because I have been watching the meetings. The Selectboard does not encumber, the school board does not encumber funds into the next year in the same way that the Selectboard does. That was mentioned a couple weeks ago. We do encumber things, but it's only for within the year. I'm guessing that's because our year is more closely tied to the school year, as opposed to you have that 3-month gap in between when your budget is voted in and
Oh, that was probably me that said that about when you guys encumbered money for the paving of
Sure.
the parking lot.
Sure.
It was technically a same year encumbrance and not
yes,
following
but
year.
that's why it's confusing.
Yeah.
Because
It is confusing.
ours is different.
Different
'cause it's
budget
a
year.
different- Yeah. That's it.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hope you feel better.
Yeah,
Thank you.
hope you heal up quickly.
Same. Going crazy.
Other public comment? Anyone else interested? Seeing, oh, Liz,
I'll just
come on
say
up.
one thing.
Come on up,
Liz-
please.
Liz Farida, South Road. I just want to remind everybody that because of budgets and things, that the co-op, the central office SAU 16 budget is, the public hearing is on October 16th at 6 PM. Just want the public
Thank
to be aware.
Back
I
to
really
PD
just wanted
overtime,
to-
we had one officer that had court last week and another officer had 5 hours of overtime for training.
Gotcha, thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment at 6:06 and move on to discussion action items. The first action item is Bob Stevens and the Conservation Commission and Jeremy Aluji from CELT to talk about the conservation easement of the Fuller property and the next steps. Come on up. I don't know who's coming up, or the whole team, come on up. We could probably you can grab a chair from over there, or. As long as you're near one of the other microphones, it's whatever works
Is this mic?
best.
Yep.
There's a microphone there and one there, yeah, just so that you can be picked up for the recording.
Thank you.
All right, I'll turn it over to you folks.
So the Conservation Commission has voted to participate in the conservation of the Fuller property on Pickpocket Road, and the details of which you should have received in your packets for tonight's meeting, and I guess I'd ask Jeremy to go through the details of what that conservation will include.
Sure. Not sure how much detail you'd like right now. I don't want to overdo it or underdo it. I know you did receive the packet in your, or the information in your packet. I'll just keep it short by saying that we think this is a great project, focuses on wildlife habitat, important water resources, rural character, and agricultural resources. The Conservation Commission overwhelmingly supported the project at their last meeting. We're really excited to work on it. Again, happy to answer questions. Our goal would be to close the project by the end of next year. Bob and I met with Karen, I believe last week, talked about what the bonding schedule would look like, which wouldn't incur any kind of, the timing wouldn't be until next July, I guess, at the earliest, to do the bond action. So we're not talking about doing anything immediately, other than to have the vote to support the funding through the bond, hopefully in November, if the select board approves of that public hearing. So,
Are there any next steps in terms of surveys?
Yes.
Analysis?
Yep.
What are the next steps?
Yeah. So what our goal would be at the Land Trust, once we had approval from the Select Board and Conservation Commission on the funding side of things from the town, we'd sign a purchase and sale agreement with the landowner, and then we would sign a letter of agreement with the town. At that time, we would start all the due diligence, survey work, title review, environmental hazard. All of those things, cost real money, and we just would want to make sure that both the landowner and the town were on board with those costs before we started the due diligence process. So our goal would be to start that work at the beginning of 2024, once letter of agreement and purchase and sale agreement were signed. So,
What kind of public access would be granted should this go through?
so there's not going to be public access required on this easement. It's going to be left open to the landowner. If the landowner wants to have it open, they can. It's a very small property. It's only 28 acres. There's likely to be an active farm on the property in the future. In your packet, you have maps that show how the property is aligned. There's actually quite a bit of wetland in the rear of the property. So there's really only between 10 and 15 acres of upland, the rest of it is wetlands. So not necessarily a property that would be used for trails or public access in the first place.
It was requested by Concom.
Okay. And so the conservation element of it, since a lot of it is wet, is that like 15 acres really that is theoretically buildable?
Yeah, so when the appraiser did the analysis, they suggested there be up to 6 buildable lots on the property, yep.
One question that Karen and I had been talking about before the meeting, and it helped, her answer helped me understand this, so I imagine someone else out there has the same question, is I was looking at some of the upfront costs that you were mentioning
Yep.
in terms of like surveying costs and hazardous waste assessments and things like that. And the town has a $75,000 conservation fund that we keep level funded and it's at $75,000. And my question to Karen had been, would we pay for those expenses out of that fund? And she explained to me that because SELT is driving this process forward, that SELT would cover the upfront costs and then they would be worked into the bond later on. And
Yeah,
that
so
was
we-
helpful to me to understand sort of the difference of the 2 different ways this could go.
Yeah, so we have the ability to cover the due diligence expenses up front as we incur them. It just makes it easier, frankly, to then just do all of the costs being reimbursed at the closing. That's how we did the game farm project. As to where the funding actually comes from at the town level, whether it comes through bond or through the Conservation Commission's fund, that's really a question for Bob and the Conservation Commission.
Right, but a question that we would answer sort of at the end of the process rather than at the beginning of the process, is my understanding.
Yeah, again, that question is really internal to the town. The question that we would need to have answered at the beginning of the process is whether the commitment was there for the total funding.
Yep.
I process things a little bit slow. You said that Concom did request public access. Was there something specific that they requested or just?
No, we requested that, the discussion was that if the town were going to contribute to the conservation, that we would like to have access to the property for recreation. And that was it. We were respectfully refused.
And my understanding is, Karen, I don't know if we want to talk about some legal opinions that we got in now or later on as part of this conversation.
That's up to you guys, I mean, you can release that information.
Yeah, I think there were a couple questions that had come up, and it's been a while since we've conserved a property. And Karen did speak with our legal counsel by email to address a few of these questions. And I don't know specifically if these questions came up at Concom or in general or in conversation, but there was a question about whether the wording of our warrant article, which had passed in 2022, would cover the town either buying land directly, owning an easement, or having executory interest in an easement that was owned by another interest like SELT.
Yep.
And our legal counsel has confirmed that the wording would allow us to do any of those things, meaning the process that you're suggesting is well within the warrant. The second question was about whether the wording of the warrant would support protecting farmland and I think specifically it was a farmland question, right, Karen?
Yes.
And our legal counsel had felt that if the conserving of that farmland would protect wildlife habitat, water resources, and help maintain the town's rural character, which is what the wording of the warrant is, that it would be perfectly acceptable to conserve farmland as part of the wording of that warrant. So those were the questions I think that have been floating out there. And I don't know if there's any questions or comments about that, but we felt like that kind of cleared it up a little bit for us.
What was the wording of the warrant again, so that, I know that's what triggered the concern, the
Sure.
wording of the warrant.
Sure. Let me just find. So to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate $3 million for purchasing land or other interests therein for conservation. $3 million of such sum to be raised through bonds or notes in compliance with the Municipal Finance Act, to authorize the Select Board to issue, negotiate, sell, and deliver said bonds and notes, and to determine the rate of interest thereon and the maturity and the other terms thereof, and to take any other action they deem appropriate to effectuate the sale and/or issuance of said bonds or notes, subject, however, to the following provisions. No such bonds shall be issued with a term of maturity less than 15 years. Such bonding authority shall expire at conclusion of the fiscal year 2027, which would be a 5-year term. Purpose of warrant article is to conserve parcels determined by the Conservation Committee to be of strategic conservation interest, to protect wildlife habitat and water resources while helping to maintain the town's rural character. Where practicable, such land would be made available for use of the citizens of the town for recreation, i.e. hiking, biking, running, hunting, fishing, etc., within the laws of New Hampshire. Use restrictions may be imposed by town, however, after purchase to comply with future grants, easements, and/or sale of property rights, to permanently ease for conservation and to offset the cost to town, as long as such restrictions comply with the spirit of purpose and at the discretion of the Select Board, and land or property interest to be purchased with bond proceeds shall be acquired in the name of the town by the Conservation Commission, subject to the approval of the Select Board pursuant to RSA 36A4. So I think it was along the lines of the interest to protect wildlife habitat and water resources while helping to maintain the town's rural character, and that is a pretty wide statement under which our legal counsel felt that all types of land that we feel meets that criteria would fall into that, including farmland. Fields, I think was the other question, fields and farms.
You had initially anyways, an interpretation or a thought otherwise, Karen? Is it-
I did not. I think there were some members of the Conservation Commission that was concerned that farms may be precluded based off of the verbiage of the warrant article. So I sought a legal opinion to make sure that that was not going to be an issue to impede this process moving forward.
Given that part of this parcel is a farm.
Yes.
Yeah, and just for the record, the wildlife action plan that New Hampshire Fish and Game puts together ranked this property 25 of the 28 acres in its top 3 tiers for wildlife habitat, which is quite rare. And in terms of water resources, it sits atop an aquifer. It provides pollutant attenuation and flood storage. So it's actually providing quite a bit of benefit to the town, both from a wildlife and water resource perspective.
Is that all 25 acres you're talking about, the 25 of the 28?
For the wildlife habitat, yes.
That last statement that you said, could you read that again, or say
The
that?
wildlife habitat or the water resource?
The water resources one.
Yeah, so 15.3 acres are sitting atop a high transmissivity aquifer. 7 acres are sitting atop a wellhead protection area that's used by Louisburg Circle. So that means anyone in Louisburg Circle, some of their water is being filtered by this property. 21 acres is contributing to pollutant attenuation into Dudley Brook, the Exeter River, and then Great Bay. And 13.8 acres are contributing to flood storage in the watershed as well.
And if the maximum allowable space for farming is utilized, will that still be the case, all this?
Yes, it's in fact with the open field right now, all of this is currently accurate.
So whether it's an open field or a working farm doesn't really change the water conservation impact.
No, same with New Hampshire Fish and Game.
It's interesting how much data there is out there about these. I'm glad we have people who do this and know about,
Yeah.
can give us this data, because it's really helpful. It's very nitty-gritty details about conservation.
I don't know, is this for the public hearing, is a more full presentation, or is that for tonight? Because I don't really have a good understanding of what the process, was that led to this property being selected versus, other things that you may be looking at, so just trying to get an understanding of all of this.
Yeah, I'm happy to give a background or Bob, if
can we clarify first? So the public hearing, I know there's a public hearing required if we're gonna expend funds out of the conservation trust. Is there other requirements to do a public hearing for
There's
this
not.
process? Yeah, I don't believe so. So it would just be if Concom wanted to take money out of their conservation fund, that has to be done through a public hearing. So my understanding is there is no current requirement for any further public hearing on this property because Concom has voted and brought it to us for the next step.
Oh, so this is the hearing.
This is our deliberation on whether or not we want to move forward as a select board with this property.
And we had discussed hosting a hearing on the 7th if you sign the letter of intent to give the residents an opportunity. And that way, if you chose to expend money out of the conservation fund, that would allow you to be able to do that.
So that would happen at the next hearing, or are we talking about doing it tonight?
No, that would be posted for the 7th, if
Of
you
November.
choose, yes.
Seems like the real reason to have a hearing would be if this board decides that we do want to use the conservation fund rather than bond these costs later. Which to me, like we were talking about, it's like a 50-50 because if we use conservation funds, we then have to raise those funds next year in taxes to refill the fund.
Yes.
So it's kind of like a either or, 6 to 1, whether you put it in the bond or not.
And we've been waiting for some action on this particular item for quite a while. And I just think, the voters asked for this. Concom, we asked Concom to deliver us, actionable property to acquire. They've done that, we have a lot of data on the project. We have an expert here telling us that this is a small but rare, highly qualified wildlife habitat and aquifer protection area. And I don't know if we can talk about it for as long as we want, but it seems,
I think it seems pretty rough. If, Bob, if you don't mind, to Paul's point about just how this came to be, 3 years version.
I'm fine given that if
Sure.
Jen.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, soon after the bond was, warrant article was approved, we were approached by CELTS saying that they had a person interested in conserving this property. We didn't know it was this property at the time, and asking us if we wanted to participate. To which we said yes, and that started the ball rolling. Of course, when we said yes, it was yes, we would like to learn more, and yes, we would like to participate. And then we met with the owner and met with CELT, and eventually voted to, we paid for half of a assessment appraisal, and as part of the process. And that appraisal is where this amount of $355,000 of appraised value comes from. And eventually, the Concom approved, we were approached by CELT with a proposal that has this breakdown that you've been provided with of the costs. And we agreed to participate to what we were asked to in this breakdown. And that's $250,000. I do have a question or two about the details of the logistics of it really, and that is the project is more than $355,000. It's $85,000 or more than $85,000 more than $355,000. So maybe I would like to know, just for reassurance, that we can bond the full amount. I think, reading the warrant article, I wrote the warrant article, but reading the warrant article tonight, I have questions of whether the amount beyond the appraised value can be covered by the warrant article bond or not.
We're only
So,
bonding 250.
that's right, that's right. But it's all a matter of accounting, how you look at that.
Yeah, we're happy to put all of the town's 250,000 towards the acquisition
Yeah.
cost.
So,
That can all go to Ms. Fuller.
To just keep it clean.
and it-
Because we have almost 100,000 in private funds going towards the project, which can cover costs.
it's really a formality, more of a ledger entry than,
Right.
it's just moving funds from one place to another, so. But the details matter, this is the townspeople's money, so.
Yeah, and that's where my question had come from, is did we need to pay for these smaller incremental charges out of the conservation fund?
Yeah.
And Karen felt that we could roll those into the bond, but with what you're suggesting, we wouldn't even need to. That would be covered by these other line items of grants, gifts,
Yeah.
et cetera.
We don't always have that flexibility. This is a little bit of a unique project because we were able to bring these private funds
Some
in.
donors.
but In this case, we can, so happy to do that.
How did that happen?
So there was a donor actually who has since passed away, but left right around $100,000 that she wanted it to be used towards a project like this, conserving a farm that would use this option to purchase at agricultural value, ensuring that the farm would continue to get passed on to farmers in the future. So we've been waiting for the right project, and we talked to Norma Fuller about it, and she was really supportive of the idea. She would love to see the land continue on as a farm, and so, yeah.
Great. Kind of good luck, good timing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That answer your question?
Yeah, so at least as I understand it, there wasn't like some sort of comparative analysis of properties around the town?
No, we hired a professional who did compare properties, but most of those properties were out of town because they were better comparison. I can provide the select board with a copy of that, or maybe Jeremy can send it to you, Karen. But it's a detailed document, it's probably 90 pages or something, and
What is that?
the appraisal.
Oh, okay. So, yeah,
Paul, I think what you might be asking is what we talked about a couple of weeks ago, is that 20 years ago, when they had the other bond, there was a sort of wish list, and the open space bond did a reach out. This was the opposite. This was landowners reaching out to Concom after the warrant passed, is my understanding. So, and we
Yeah.
had some discussions about if we should try to revive that old process of the town doing a purposeful reach out. But up to this point, that has not, my understanding is that has not been done. This has all just been
Well, that's not
landowners.
completely true.
Okay.
It's a little bit complicated because a lot of land has been conserved in Brentwood.
Right.
And we can only conserve land that becomes available to us.
Right.
And we have reached out to several people in one form or another, and we will continue to do that. And we are working on a list of properties in town and prioritizing those properties. And we have reached out to a few people formally and informally.
So there has been kind of both processes
Yes.
going on. Okay.
And not quite as rigorous a process as I might like, but it is being done both ways. But again, people aren't interested in selling, there's nothing we can do about that, or in conserving their property. So this became available as the Swayze property is becoming available as well. And we were approached, and we are here now, so.
What was the vote on the Concom for this?
I abstained because the Southeast Land Trust is a client of mine. There was 7 members there to vote, and 5 voted yes and 1 voted no.
That was the second vote. That was the second.
Yes.
And so is the total commitment 250, as I'm understanding?
At this point, that's what the projected town bond estimate is coming out at. So I think what Jeremy is looking for, if I understand it correctly, is an official vote by this board to move forward with the intention of processing that bond next summer.
Probably the July is is what we,
if everything goes according to plan.
right.
Jen, I'm confused, so is this the public hearing, or is there another?
There's no public hearing required.
Okay, so can I just make one other public comment then? When you read the conservation, Liz Faria, South Road, when you read conservation easement, it does say where possible, public access, I just.
Yep, and it sounds like that was requested. Yeah, and I think,
Question is not.
yeah,
But
and I
doesn't
think
there
we've
have to
had,
be a reason it was denied or anything?
I don't think so. I think that's up to the landowner who still owns the land. This is just an easement.
Right.
So I think there's certain properties, and my understanding from what you're saying, Jeremy, I'm not familiar with all the ins and outs of the property, is that this property doesn't necessarily lend itself to hiking trails or similar.
It doesn't, and I mean, in a nutshell, you know, we do a lot of these projects, and there are some properties that come along that already have public trails on them or would be a great benefit to the public if they were conserved and trails were placed on them. But, you know, to John's point and to Bob's point, you know, sometimes with conservation, you have an opportunity because a landowner is willing to conserve a really important property, but they might not be willing to allow public access. So you can get all of these other conservation benefits by conserving it, or you can walk away.
Right.
And so that's your choice.
Right.
And I think the Conservation Commission made a good choice here. They're getting a lot for, you know, for the money.
No one can say whether that's right, no one can say whether the Conservation Commission would have voted to approve this if the answer had been absolutely no. In other words, she has not said that the conservation easement will deny access to the public. It leaves it up to the property owner at the time.
Yeah.
So in the future, that property owner could say, absolutely,
Right.
I'd love to have, you know, skiers out here or, you know, whatever. And I disagree with Jeremy that I think there's plenty of fun to be had on that property. I know my wife would be there the day it opened if it was in the winter to ski
Gotcha.
it. So
But to your point, if the property changes hands, the next owner can
absolutely.
completely change those regulations. Yeah, gotcha.
So
I'm presuming that like implicit is that she would preclude the present owner.
that's right.
The current
She
owner.
has, Mrs. Fuller is a sweet lady, and she has no interest though in seeing people come on her property and wondering who they are and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So, I wish it were not so, but I understand.
Right. And I like the way you described it, that it's like a balancing act, you know, in terms of what benefits you can get to the community. You might not get 100% of what you might want in a perfect world. And also, I think your clarification is really helpful, that the easement itself does not preclude it. It just leaves it up to the landowner. So it's open for the future.
And the danger would be if you said, well, we don't want to work with Ms. Fuller, let's wait till the next landowner. The next landowner could be a developer,
Sure.
and then you lose that opportunity to
Right.
get any of those benefits.
Right, then you have.
So,
Good.
How were these easement terms developed? Is that like a standard list, or how does that?
yeah, so this is a fairly standard template that CELT uses. And it's something that we've used in a lot of the previous conservation easements that we've done with the town of Brentwood. It's fairly similar to the game farm project, although that had some federal language in it that we couldn't change. But this is a fairly standard template, yeah.
And the basic features that would be protective are what of those?
Yeah,
terms?
so it prohibits any kind of residential development in the future. It allows agriculture and forestry with best management practices. No plowing up wetlands. It doesn't allow any kind of hazardous materials to be dumped illegally on site.
I haven't read it and I apologize, but some of these easements restrict other types of structures being built on it. So, for instance, windmills or solar panels, or even unless they're agriculturally related and of a certain size, they're not allowed.
Yeah, so this easement, it allows for 2% impervious surfaces. So that means for agriculture or forestry, say the farmer needed to put up a barn, they could build up to 2% of the total property area in impervious surface or a barn. It also allows for renewable energy structures up to that 2%, but it has to be used for agriculture or forestry. You couldn't put up, 2% worth of renewable energy and then sell it wherever you wanted. It has to be used on the property.
And just to kind of line things for you all in the future, as we go along, this easement language that you're going to see will be different depending on who's putting the money up. And if the federal government agency puts it up, then there is quite different language. I believe Dexter Swayze here has offered to potentially conserve some of his property, and he's going to propose his own easement, I believe, for that property, his own language. So this is what SELT normally uses, and then they negotiate, or whoever is managing the project negotiates with the agency that might be giving grant money, and that agency has its own, likes and dislikes when it comes to easing the property. So.
And Jeremy or Bob, can you explain so that the public understands kind of the difference between SELT owning the easement and what role town of Brentwood then plays on the easement?
Yeah, I can describe that briefly. So we hold the easement, and I think that's one of the greatest benefits that everyone's getting here. So SELT will hold the easement. That means we go out, we monitor it every year. If there's any kind of violation, we enforce it. The town of Brentwood holds what's called an executory interest. So that means if SELT were to go away, or if we were to stop enforcing the easement, the town has the right to enforce it and the right to step in and take over if SELT no longer exists. But you don't have the responsibility of having to do that every year. That requires a lot of time and energy, and if you're not using volunteers' money to do that. So the advantage here is you're contributing a one-time sum, but you don't have the responsibility every year of having to monitor and enforce the easement perpetually forever. So.
And I'm assuming there's some liability implications there as well. And I don't know how, for conservation, what
Yeah.
kind of liability comes up, but I'm sure.
Yeah, so
there's-
one of the things, I don't remember if I have it as an individual line item or not. So under stewardship costs, there's a legal defense fund. So that's actually something called terra firma. We get it through our accreditation organization. And that's kind of like insurance for easement violations. All of the land trusts around the country pool like an insurance company would, and it helps us defend our conservation easements. So it's sort of a way to buy a little bit of liability insurance.
Gotcha.
So, yep,
Gotcha.
we incorporate that into the cost.
So that's interesting. I'm sorry, I don't know this, so do you mind if I ask him a question?
Yeah, no, please.
If the defense fund is for, if someone challenges a conservation easement, like wants to develop the property, or is it for other types of things?
It's very specific. It's for certain types of violations and not for others.
So if they make a mess, if they put hazardous materials on the site and you want to make them remove it,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff?
Yeah, certain, people can, we can't stop people from doing things, we can only force them to clean it up.
Get the courts involved.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Board members have other questions? Russ?
Just want to clarify a couple of things, or make sure I'm on the right schedule. Is there a Concom meeting tomorrow night? Am I correct on that?
Yes.
And is Andy, do we know if Andy's,
I believe he will be in attendance. I think he's working tonight.
okay. And I guess, Bob, anything for us based on that memo that Jen read off? Do you have any follow-ups or questions or anything else on that before we wrap up?
No, I think the letter of intent, or we talked about at our meeting together, I asked Jeremy to make sure it includes a provision that if for some reason the state does not approve our request to bond, that the town is let out of its agreement to conserve the property. In other words, I've never seen a real estate transaction where the ability to achieve financing wasn't an integral part of it. So if we can't get the money from the state for some reason, they determine for some reason we can't, then we would be let out of the deal. Nobody anticipates that happening, but it's something that I asked to just protect the town's interest.
Have we ever had trouble bonding any other properties? No. So just a hypothetical protection.
So I guess just one more thing, I just wanted to, I guess, say, I can only speak for myself at this moment, we'll see, obviously how things proceed, but very much appreciative of Mrs. Fuller, of course, for engaging the town on this and being willing, and Conservation Commission, as was stated, initially, I wasn't part of it, but the second time, the second vote that was more recent, when I was covering for Andy, it was an overwhelmingly supportive vote. So appreciate that work by the Conservation Commission, and importantly, some citizens in town who I think have been active in, asking for reconsideration. So appreciate the engagement of a lot of people, and of course, Jeremy, your work and Celt's work here. I was there for your presentation to the Concom, and as I said that, I was just very impressive and much appreciated on behalf of the town for the work there. So thanks to all involved.
Well said. Other questions or concerns from any board members?
Make a motion to issue a letter of intent in favor of moving forward.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm an aye. So that's a 4-0 pass to move forward with the conservation process for the Fuller property. And we will hear back, when would be the next sort of update point for this board?
I think I can work with Karen on that letter of agreement and probably work with council, and then once we do that, I'll notify you of our purchase and sale agreement with the landowner.
Great,
So
wonderful.
hopefully have that by the end of the year.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
And thank you to Concom too.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Do I need to stay for anything else?
I don't think so.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Bob. All right, so we have 2,750,000 left. It's got to keep going, keep working. All right, next on our agenda is some budget review. We have 5 budgets that will be discussed tonight. There were 4 listed in the pre-published minutes, and then Karen added on emergency management, which came into her today. So it's not in the packet, but is available to anyone who wants to see a copy of that. And we're doing executive office, legal, welfare, waste collection and disposal, and emergency management. Which one would we like to start with?
Do you want to start with emergency management?
Sure, emergency management first. Come on up.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Richard Murphy, 35 Eleanor's Way, Emergency Management Director. This is my 14th budget to be presented to the board.
Congratulations,
Yeah.
or I'm sorry.
We've never overspent our budget in the time that I've been the Emergency Management Director for the town. The interesting aspect about this particular budget and budgets that I've submitted in the past is with the line item for Seabrook Station. That is $8,500 that we received from the station as a blanket payment for basically covering costs and issues that may come up that would be part of the radiological emergency planning aspect. It can be used for a wide variety of items. We've used it for traffic control points, we've used it for street signs, we've used it for repair of generators. So that particular line item is usually specific to that. We can move money around within that line, but it mainly deals with things that would be for infrastructure that would support the REP program. My budget, because of that line item, I've been able to maintain a pretty flat rate budget. So the actual emergency management budget would be $6,375. With that particular budget and my same warning that I give every year, this money allows us to open up, to get the ball rolling in the state of an emergency, break glass, insert favorite emergency here. It allows us to get our EOC up and running, get us through operational periods until either some type of declaration comes from federal, state, or local, allowing us to spend further funds as necessary to deal with whatever emergency we're dealing with at the time.
And just ask a clarifying question. So that money that's listed under Seabrook
Correct.
does not have to just be held to some radiologic emergency?
We can use it for infrastructure, radios, whatever.
So something that we would need to use in a radiologic nuclear emergency, but might also have other uses to the town.
Correct.
Gotcha.
That's correct.
Okay.
So it's very broad in its use. It could be anything from Wi-Fi infrastructure, computers, replacement of laptops, TVs, monitors, chairs. We recently, let's see what we can do. We recently updated the chairs in the EOC. They were original from when the fire station was built. And the EOC is located in the fire station. So we made that expenditure last month. So that was also where some of that money came from.
And I missed the department head meeting last week, but I read in the minutes that there was a discussion about potentially making a change to how that $8,500
Correct.
is managed.
It's been suggested from our state liaison that we could come up with a warrant article that would allow this particular line to roll over, to accumulate, which would be a zero effect to any type of tax impact, but it also would allow us to create a larger fund to cover larger ticket items, such as the replacement of a generator, or looking at a building that doesn't have a generator. So we could look at those costs by taking this money and rolling it over.
On a year-to-year basis,
Yes.
how much of that $8,500 generally goes back to the taxpayers versus gets spent by your department?
It really depends on the year, but I would say between 50 and 60% of it. Right now, if you look at the particular line, I'm sitting at 52% of that particular
That you've spent.
line. So it depends on the year. This particular year, we're in our testing cycle for Seabrook, so there'll be 3 drills that'll be held. That's money that's already been budgeted by the state of New Hampshire. I believe we got, Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, in the area of $10,000 to $12,000 just to manage those drills
Gotcha.
and exercises.
And if we wanted to roll this over, would we have to create a capital reserve fund specifically for emergency revolving fund? Is that something that you're looking for a decision on at this point?
And I've already asked Karen for assistance in trying to draft that language for a warrant article.
So would we just wait till warrant article language came forward and vote at that time? Okay. Is there anyone on the board that has comments about that idea of rolling over those funds into a revolving fund? I don't see any real downs. I mean, the only downside is it's a little bit of money that won't go back to the taxpayers and instead will go into a fund so that we don't have to ask the taxpayers for money. So it cancels itself out essentially, in my view.
Basically, that money comes directly from Seabrook Station. We accumulate that money quarterly. We accumulate that by showing, I guess, the best way to put it is that we show that we are able and capable of opening our EOC, having the proper forms. We go through a checklist every quarter. State rep comes down, we go through all the stuff in the EOC. That satisfies the Seabrook qualifications, and they put the money into the fund. We used to have to budget this kind of money to run the REP program, but Seabrook, when they evaluated it, decided to give each town a specific amount of money to deal with these issues.
Okay. So we'll wait on the warrant for the potential revolving fund issues, and I see you coming in with a completely level funded budget compared to last year,
That is correct.
which totals $14,875. Any other comments from the board on that budget?
No.
Well, congratulations on 14 years. In a position where consistency and standards and everything really counts, we appreciate you doing that. And before I forget, you mentioned, and we talked about it last week, but the 18th.
That is correct.
And Paul, did you indicate that you wanted to go to that, so the secret drill? Oh, okay. Sorry. When you were asking questions, I think it was mentioned that you could go if you wanted to.
We do
I just
usually,
What time is it?
it depends on when they actually
When
kick
you
off
get
the
the call.
drill, it'll be sometime in the morning.
I'm going, so don't worry. I'm going anyway.
We usually have a representative from the board that sits in on the EOC. This would also be standard for any emergency that we would have to open the EOC, to have that representative of the board at that meeting, or that particular emergency. I know that we've had support from the town administrator and the clerk in the times that we have had to open the EOC in an actual emergency. So these kind of drills give the opportunity for the select board to use our job aids, to see how the process works. Decision-making is important, and that's usually how it works in the drills. The first one is usually getting out the rust.
Sounds good.
We saw that.
We'll see what time.
I'm going.
We don't necessarily have a set time. It's supposed to be a progression of an emergency, and the notifications go out, and then we notify our key staff, and they respond to the EOC. Usually anywhere between 8 and 9 o'clock in the morning is when it starts. We usually finish sometime after the lunchtime hour.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we have a level funded budget on the table. I would appreciate a motion for this budget. All in favor of the emergency management budget for $14,875? And I'm an aye, so that's a pass. Thank you very much.
Thank you
And we
very
look
much.
forward to further discussion about your revolving fund warrant.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a close meeting.
Yeah, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Because I'm actually going to cover it anyway. But I didn't want it to get lost in case you did actually want to go. I think he had the impression because you were asking some questions about it last week. So.
You're off the hook if you're busy. All right, the next budget,
Little much.
yeah,
Little much of it.
like most emergencies
As
are.
far as the time goes.
The next budget on the table is executive office budget.
So this is, I'm presenting a level funded budget. This includes select board salaries, pre-employment physicals, and medical exams. All of those expenses I've kept level funded here. Annual medical exams is the requirement that will cover one firefighter's annual test, so they rotate them so that they're not all on the same time. Advertising notices and florals if we are to experience a death.
And we have $1 in longevity program.
The fire department used to run a longevity program that they
Oh,
called
right.
a length of service.
Right.
And over the years, they didn't have staff that met the requirements, and so we just left it open at
We're just holding
$1.
it for now. And then $1 in books and publications,
Yes.
because we haven't generally needed to
No,
pull
we
that
used
line
to
item.
purchase like the RSA books, but there's no
It's
need
all
for
online.
it. It's all online
Okay,
now.
so we'll just hold that at 1 for now in case we found a need for
Yes.
funding that. And then this also includes,
And the consortium is the DOT consortium through Exeter Hospital for our highway employees. And then they're pooled in a random drug pool for drug and alcohol testing.
questions or comments about the executive office budget?
Did the select board want to raise, or would you like to leave this level funded?
I'm okay with leaving it level funded. Anyone want to give themselves a raise? I
I
think we're good. I think we're good. If there's no questions, I'll take a motion.
Motion for the level fund.
Second.
All in favor of a budget for executive office of level funding 25005? And I'm an aye, so that's a pass. It is kind of small, yes. It tests your eyes. The next budget is legal.
So this is engineering, so the engineering and surveying is the cost that we pay for driveway permit applications. Town council is here level funded. We are anticipating one case potentially going to trial next year, so this should cover that additional cost here. And then we put in $1 for perambulations and payments to IRS.
We're cutting a little close this year on actuals with the engineering and surveying. Do we need?
I think we'll be okay. It's $75 per driveway permit through TEC. And phase 2 of
Is this because of
Three Ponds is,
Three Ponds? Yeah.
is concluded.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Do you have a budget on the case that's going to trial next year? Is that the Wicks case?
That is not, because that's covered through Primex. So the one that would potentially go to trial is the Davy case.
Do you have a budget on that?
That's in July.
council?
I think that's good. They're planning for a 4-day trial, so that'll be about 10.
I'm wondering if we could
If we go
cut
to
that
trial.
legal service line a little bit. I know that we had bumped it up last year because we had multiple cases this prior year, some of which have now concluded. I don't want to take away a buffer that we need, but it looks like we have not spent what we budgeted last year. Do you feel that we need that buffer of that 33.5, or do you think we would be okay to drop that back down a little bit? Because it had been an increase, right, last year?
I had increased it because we were anticipating going to trial in October, and that case settled.
Right.
So I had bumped it up 8,500 to cover those legal expenses. So 20,000 is what we're spending right now, just on a regular, routine questions to council. So I would leave it at the 33.5 and leave it level,
Okay,
just in anticipation of going to trial.
okay. Any other questions about this budget?
None.
So this is level funded, right, Karen?
Yes,
Just don't see the total.
37,127.
37,127. So we have a motion for a level funded legal budget of 37,127. Second from Paul. All in favor? I'm an aye. So that's a pass for 37,127. Welfare is next.
Welfare, this is the salary of our welfare director. She is paid $675 per quarter. The FICA Medi and additional training is just $1 to go with her. And then direct assistance, we budget at $4,500. So that's the cost that we would outlay to, if we needed to cover the cost of hotels for some first month's rent, security deposits to our residents here.
And looks like we've expended $1,550 so far this year. Are there some years where we expend closer to the 4,500?
There are, generally, we try to use the regional associations and use those resources to offer the assistance and not have to utilize this line item at all.
Do we think we need to keep it at 4,500, or is that more than we will probably need?
I think you could probably trim it a little. I mean, this is for one person, is what we've spent. So I guess it depends on how many cases you get a year. Generally, there's maybe a handful that we might get.
Is this like based on an application? or
Yes.
is that-
Yes, they have to submit an application with all of their finances, their paychecks, show their hardship, show their lease agreement.
It's not a big line item, so I think I don't see anybody feel strongly about cutting it a little versus leaving it where it is.
I mean, really, no impact.
Yeah, it's a small line item. I think we can leave it and reassess, over the next couple of years what we're actually expending. I would be okay with that. So we have on the table a welfare budget that is level funded at 7,407.
Motion. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm an aye, so that's a pass for 7,407. Next, we have recycling waste disposal.
So the costs have increased in waste collection and recycling collection based off of our contract with Casella. So it's a 4% escalator going into the last year of our contract. Landfill fees was increased slightly. So the tonnage cost for the recycling disposal is also at a 4% escalator, so that's to encompass that. And our average monthly disposal is 12,800. So if you take 12,800 multiplied by the 12, it comes to the 153.6. So that's based off of our year-to-date actuals, is how I come up with that average there.
And these two increases are contractual
Correct, and so
budget obligations.
Casella's contract will be expiring in December of '24, so next summer we'll be looking to put that back out for bid with an option to do a up to 3-year extension with Casella.
Make a motion for 49323 for next year's waste and recycling.
Second.
All in favor?
Hurts a little.
There's some laughing about this.
Just, yeah.
I'm an aye.
He made a noise when he read the total.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It's contractual.
Yeah.
But by the way, just a quick note on that, how much, how cool it is, or the person who used to run the Facebook page for them, posting, reminding everybody of the trucks coming and all that.
Yeah.
That's a little extra, that was really.
Yes, that was really nice. People liked that.
I guess he left.
Yep. Maybe we'll get someone else to do it. All right, so that was our 5 budgets that we had on deck for tonight. No other budgets on the list for tonight. Okay, so that concludes our budgets for tonight. Next, we'll move on to regular business. I'm gonna start with just a few items from the mail. We had already discussed the legal opinions on Concom, so that's already done. 2 other items from the mail to pass on. For those who remember the discussion we had a couple of weeks ago about HB 321, about sealed meeting minutes needing to be potentially unsealed. We did some research with the help of New Hampshire Municipal Society, which had a couple good articles, and it was extremely helpful and very nice to learn that there is a 10-year grace period involved in that bill, meaning that it gives towns time to basically make a plan and either adopt their own process or follow the default 10-year process, which would give this board up to 10 years to review all sealed minutes. I think it started in the 60s,
Yes.
from 1960 until present. So Karen and I discussed this, and our plan would be to hold on this until after budget season and then potentially talk about how we might want to see this move forward. They gave some examples of, some boards have different members review different chunks of years. There's all different ways that we could do it, and we will talk about that in the future. So just wanted to follow up on that item. The last piece of mail that is relevant is, I think the public is probably aware that the Mills Fall Neighborhood Association had filed suit against the town of Brentwood Planning Board and the town about the Mill Falls development. And there was a finding by the Superior Court in favor of the town on all counts. There is a 30-day appeal period, but at this point, the town was happy to see that we had a judgment in our favor on that court case. And that was all that I had from the mail. I don't know if anybody had any comments on any of those items.
I just think, obvious, with Andy not being here, and that Concom related is.
Yeah, we'll make sure he sees that. Yep.
I emailed him a copy today.
Yeah.
I can't hear you, Russ, sorry, I can't hear you back here.
He just wanted to make sure
Yeah,
Andy
I was just making sure
gets a
Andy
copy.
has that memo on Concom. We got a legal opinion on Concom thing.
Oh, okay.
We talked about it earlier. I just want to
Yeah,
make sure
yeah.
Andy has it,
For this week's
but
meeting.
I really didn't need to bring it up.
But thank you for anyways. He'll have it.
Has a little bit.
He'll have it. Did you have any regular business for us tonight, Karen?
Not in public session.
Okay. John?
That indicates that we have to have a.
We have a very brief legal non-public at the end. Very brief. We'll turn to John for committee updates and other board business.
I haven't gotten the draft minutes from BudCon yet, but there are a lot of questions that I'm heads up incoming. And then,
More?
yeah,
I met with Jack today.
oh, okay, did you?
I did.
Okay, so hopefully you guys cleared up most of whatever.
I gave Jack 3 years' worth of MS1s, which is our net valuations, MS 737s, which are the proposed budgets for the last 3 years, and the 434s, which is the revenues.
Okay, great. And then the only other thing I have is just a reminder that the community engagement seminar, otherwise known as the charrette presentation, will be happening at the rec on Thursday, November 2nd at 6 p.m. And we hope to see as many folks there as possible to see what is possible over at the rec.
Is it online, John?
What's that?
Has it been posted online yet?
I don't think so.
One more time with the details, please.
Thursday, November 2nd, 6 p.m. at the rec.
Will that be recorded or streamed anywhere?
If someone would like to volunteer to record or stream it, that would be most welcome.
Okay.
We have recorded meetings at the BRC before, haven't we?
We can, yes. I
We
can
can.
set it up before.
If there is a button for me to press, that would be, I can handle that, but
We'll work on it.
We will attempt to get that recorded,
We'll work on that.
right?
Yeah.
Is that all?
Look at you, Jerry.
John's way was nicer. I recognize that.
John was just afraid he was gonna be asked.
To push the
Right.
buttons.
I'm surprised you didn't have a list of questions for us.
No, there is a list. I said that I was gonna need the minutes
Yeah.
from the number of questions that there were.
Okay, hopefully they'll be resolved by the time you bring them back to us.
I would love that.
Great,
Next.
okay. Russ, you're up.
For my update, I just wanted to clarify the next couple, because I write down upcoming events, and I know there's a lot of stuff in October, and I'm guessing maybe I missed one, but. So, this Saturday, the 14th, is the fire department's open house
Pancake breakfast.
pancake breakfast.
Yes.
9 to 11.
9 AM?
I think it's Monday.
9 AM. I unfortunately cannot go because my son has a football game that conflicts with this, but I did want to just mention throwing pancake and fire.
Pancake lovers
And fire department.
and fire department.
And the 16th, I think Liz mentioned
Yep.
school budget.
Public hearing.
That's at SST at 6 PM,
No,
right?
no.
I got the wrong one?
I believe it's
I'm
at the
glad
Roy
I wrote it.
Morrison room at the high school.
It's at the high school.
Is that the
Think so.
same day as budget?
It is the same day and time as the
Oh,
budget.
this really stinks.
It does.
Okay, that's partly why I was bringing this up, so there's two
Yes.
budget related
Yes.
at the same
Yeah.
time.
At the same time.
All right, well, obviously, that's not our purview.
Unless BudCom wants to move their meeting.
Or could Bud come, record their meeting would be nice since they're in here and we have the recordings? Just a suggestion.
Letty?
If someone wants to.
That's up to
know.
BudCom.
You're the select board member, you're the one
That's
that's
up to
control over
Bedcom.
that laptop.
I have control over very little around here.
Could you please suggest it to the chair?
So there are those two things, and then on the 16th, which again is next Monday, there's a third event at the library honoring Liz McConnell for being named Library Trustee of the Year.
Yes, congratulations.
That's at 7 PM. And then, as we mentioned, the 18th, which is next Wednesday, Seabrook Drill. And then finally, the 27th of October is the Haunted Walk at the Rec. Anyway, I just wanted to make sure, am I missing anything? That's a lot of stuff in the next.
That is a lot.
That is a lot of stuff.
Yeah, there's
If anyone wants to be a
communication.
scarer for the 27th, Andy would like volunteers.
Last year Russ did an excellent
Yeah.
job
I heard about that.
scaring.
Yeah, I think I have another football game on that same night.
I was the costume judge, that was quite fun.
Was it?
Yes, the two of us were there
Well,
last year.
my oldest son will probably do it in my stead.
Trick or treat, 31st.
Yes.
Correct,
31st.
yes.
All right.
And
Thank
no
you.
select board meeting that evening.
We decided to cancel, I believe, on
Yes.
Halloween, yes, correct. Okay. Any other updates you have? Okay, sounds good.
That's a lot of effort.
I did see some back and forth emails with
Ripple Rec?
Yes, with Rick LeBrecq about in early November having the public hearing. So for anybody who's interested in community power, those dates are being firmed up for public hearings for
Nothing's
community
set.
power. The dates are not set yet, but likely to be the first week in November, correct? So keep your ears open for that.
Thanks.
Paul?
Yes, I'm glad I have some planning board members here, because I know there was a list that I was supposed to present, and I can only remember one. Which one was that? The projecting equipment.
Oh, yeah, and then the other item is, after 6 months, we've been talking for 6 months as a result of preparing for the court case, that planning board members should have Brentwood.gov email addresses to their
Thank you.
board.
Yeah.
We haven't seen progress on that.
Wasn't that done?
8 months ago, 2 months ago.
And then
I think we budgeted for it.
initiate a
We
letter.
reached out to-
I thought that was done, honestly, so thank you for bringing that forward if that is not done.
So, yeah, we've got the,
Yep.
okay.
So planning board emails,
Yep.
yep.
And then, I know we were talking about buying some equipment for, audio and visual, and I know the planning board was as well. I believe it's part of our budget, and we were ready to.
We voted.
The suggestion was to have Jillian speak to Karen.
Yep,
To
and so
get
I
it.
asked Josh Bertolin, who's on the communications subcommittee, to reach out to Jillian to make sure that his proposal for this run meets planning board's needs.
It would make sense to work in coordination with the planning board.
Yeah.
Voted almost a year ago to get something rolling. So we discussed that at our last meeting here a week ago and decided that if there was no forthcoming information from this other group by December 1st, we were going to go ahead and plan to.
I think there was a proposal like on the table or being worked on, right?
They had a proposal, and
Yeah.
then they were working on finalizing those quotes. And then
Okay.
I just wanted Josh to touch base with Jillian to make sure that
Okay.
that lined up with what
So
they
maybe we
should
can
be
push
looking
them a little bit to try to come before us with that proposal. Would it come before us or would it go potentially to planning? Because what I'm hearing is
at. I guess
planning
if
may
they want to
cover
pay
it.
for it, it doesn't have to come here. but-
Does planning feel that they're,
Well, I think the idea was that, we don't need to duplicate ourselves.
Correct.
right, or we can cost share if that's what's required. Sure,
I
sure.
think that was the idea.
To do a cost sharing between the two boards. Okay.
Yeah, no.
We've got $6,000 less.
Oh, thanks for telling us.
No, that's just our total budget, discretion. So
We will definitely, I think we've been I know he was supposed to come one day and he couldn't
He was out
come.
of town that week.
So maybe we can do a gentle nudge to get that up towards the top of an agenda in the coming weeks.
Acknowledge who's been speaking, by the way, from the planning board.
This is Bruce Stevens.
Yes.
Bruce Stevens and Doug Fair.
Just for the
If
record.
you're mad at me, my name is George Finley. If you're not, I'm done.
Part of the issue there, of course, was we had the communications committee working on that, or they actually probably, I think, initiated. But the town website, that's one of the things that I've been adamant about, is that the website be done and not try and do too many things at once. So that's the delay, I think, on the AV equipment stuff, is like, yeah, let's get this website done, so.
Okay.
It's a lot, it's a lot.
The AV done, they already approved the AV.
I don't believe so.
You don't?
We haven't
AV,
approved.
not the website, no?
We haven't approved any dollar value for an AV upgrade. We've talked about it, but we haven't had
There was like a baby presentation that I gave to David.
we haven't had an official quote put before us,
Okay.
but we are eagerly awaiting one.
Back to you, Paul.
I think, and as I said, I think Jillian has some quotes that, that she presented, so, I mean, to the extent that can be coordinated, that would be.
Perfect.
And then the final thing is that we had addressed this issue with regard to the old Bessie's and what's going on there. My concern, and I think the planning board's concern, was that if at this point, they couldn't really determine that it was a change in use, so it really wasn't, at this time, thought within the planning board's jurisdiction. They were asking what the select board would do. The concern was at the last meeting, Kip had said that he had been dealing with the construction. He had told them that he needed an engineering plan in order for them to proceed, but then after that, as I understand it, there site on a Friday with construction saws and dumpsters and a crew that was out there. So you know, it just gives me cause for concern in terms of the appearance. It just, to me, doesn't have a good optic because they're doing things, you know, that really aren't authorized to be done. And I just, I'm concerned about the precedent that sets.
Are they on a planning board agenda? No.
No. So I think the planning board was looking for some direction from the select board in terms of issuing some sort of letter to the landowner saying that this needs to,
Like a cease and desist?
yeah, that this needs to stop, like a cease and desist.
Historically, how have we dealt with these kind of situations where people are doing some work without a visit to the planning board?
So I guess there's a couple of things here. You have a site that is, they had a demo permit that KIP had approved. They have applied for a permit for plan examination, which was signed off by the board on September 26th.
What is that, sorry, plan examination, what does that mean?
So that's just building plans. So KIP is waiting for a certified copy from a structural engineer to say that the trusses that they're safe to sit on the walls and that they meet state building code, because they had done some of that work preemptively to pulling the permits. He's working with the contractor and also the property owner to make sure that that information is obtained and that KIP is satisfied with those and that they meet all of the building codes.
But as of right now.
As of right now,
that
the last communication that we have had, KIP spoke to the property owner today at 2:30 in the afternoon. He had received an initial report. I don't know that he had had time to review it to make sure that it meets his need now. Having said that, they will not qualify for an occupancy permit. The last communication that they've had was from Shane, who is the contractor, saying that they intend to use it for an ice cream stand, which is not a change of use. So I think there's some so I guess we're not sure what the use is. So KIP needs to know if there's gonna be a change of use. If there is, then that needs to go to the planning board for an amendment to the site plan.
Well, that's part of the problem, is that the permit for DOT had indicated it was a change of use and that it was an office. Now we're hearing
Right,
ice
so-
cream. So the problem is we don't know because there's been no communication.
Right, but they can't occupy the space or operate their business without an occupancy permit from KIP or site plan approval. So issuing a cease and desist, I think at this point, is counterproductive because they need to get the building safe and there's no way for them to do that unless we get this certified copy from an engineer saying that it's safe to be
The
there.
problem, I think, though, is more that they went ahead and did a lot of things without any authorization whatsoever. And then KIP, had gone out there and said, this is what needs to be done. And then they were still back out there, as I understand it.
Right, but as of now, you have a contractor and a property owner that are both being cooperative with him and working with him towards compliance. So do you want to disrupt that process, or?
Does KIP have any significant safety concerns at this point that he feels are not being addressed,
He does not.
that pose a risk to anyone on the site?
He does not.
So it's kind of like the gold standard process is not being followed, but
But they're being cooperative
progress
to
is
get there.
being made and we're
Right.
trying to get to that process.
Right.
And at some point, they need to declare what their intended use is of this property.
Correct.
And if it is not a significant change of use from a restaurant, they do not need to go to planning board, but if it is a change of use, they do.
Correct.
I see your point, totally. It feels like they sort of put the cart before the horse.
Yes.
And the question is, what do we do about it now that makes the most sense for the community?
What's done is done. I guess the concern was that after speaking, KIP, then they're back. Saws and, it seems to me that they should stop until we get, that engineering plan showing that this is going to be a safe building and some sort of communication from the owner as to what it's going to be, so we know. Because right now, I feel like, I don't know know, maybe Kip knows, but I feel like as a board, and the planning board, we're in the dark.
Did-
Is there a signed building permit by the board?
I don't have the last page of it, but this is from 26.
Did Kip ask them to cease all work?
He has not. He doesn't think that it is productive at that point.
So at this point,
But
they've not violated any instructions
Do
from
they
Kip?
have a building permit, I guess?
They held an application for plan review.
I really do think that if they don't have a building permit.
They shouldn't be
need to
building.
stop immediately.
Right.
Like, full stop. That's just,
Well, and the recourse has always been that you would issue them a fine 3 times the building permit value. That's always been the recourse for. It hasn't necessarily been stop work. It's been, we're gonna issue the permit and then fine you for not having gotten this proactively.
So we need to determine if there is a permit
Don't we
on
have,
file.
don't we have a authority to issue at least a letter that says, look, you need to stop? And,
and get a building permit, and you're gonna be fined
and,
3 times the.
right, and to come in here and say what you're doing.
This was signed and approved last week during the meeting.
The building permit?
SLC Realty 266 Route 125.
Okay. So they
So they
have
have
a
a
building
permit,
permit?
yes.
And presumably, are they going to be fined because they were building before that was signed?
I can follow up with Kip, but they had the demo work, so I guess I'm not sure when they started reconstructing.
Versus when that was signed by the board last week? Okay. So if they have a signed building permit on file,
We signed a building permit last week.
Yes, it was part of that consent agenda.
I wasn't here, so I'm assuming the rest of you signed it.
I also,
It's in the, where's the consent agenda?
It was from last week. It was in the 926 agenda.
Yeah, so, as with, as
Do
with,
you
as
want me
with
to
a
go
lot
grab
of
a
things.
copy?
Yeah, it might be helpful just to confirm that it was signed.
Actually, it's in the minutes.
Oh, this is the 1010.
Oh, and 926, so there's every minute.
Oh, actually, I have the minutes, Karen, because I printed them.
The 926 minutes.
Which,
It's SLC, no, it's the wheat briar.
Usually that's you.
No, where's it?
yeah, because this is this week's.
I thought we were wrapping up with Ron, so.
We're almost done. If there's a signed building permit, then they can keep building.
But it would have been.
Yes, in the minutes.
Highlighted, I realize that we have responsibility too.
I'm surprised you just didn't have it like memorized.
Oh, she's a little. I looked it up online, but it is in the minutes.
Yeah, that's true. That's fair.
It's in the minutes from the prior week.
She's not upset.
So if it's in the minutes, then the board signed the building permit.
I'm not.
This is the 926 consent agenda. These are the building permits, it's this one here, SLC Realty.
Yep. So SLC Realty 266 Route 125 was signed. So, I mean, I guess the question for Kip is, were they building in violation of that permit and therefore will be fined, or if not, they will not be fined?
I guess I'd like to know too whether or not that permit was issued, we signed off on it after they had already done the construction.
That would be where they would be subject to a fine.
And I'll be honest with you, if I would have known that, because, a lot of times we're mechanically signing these, and shame on me, first doing it, but.
Would you
You're
have
not
had,
gonna know every address.
would you have had a reason not to sign a building permit for that site?
Absolutely, I mean, because they've already built, I'm not gonna sign, a permit if they've already done something on there, because I feel like they've already been violative.
But if the remedy is to fine them and you don't sign the permit so that they can make progress to move forward,
I
then
guess
you're at a
I'd want them to,
standstill.
Bad precedent.
I'd want them to stop until, I had further explanation and had them before the board as, as
sounds like it's unclear the timing of when demolition turned into construction anyway, so we'll get that cleared up offline with Kip if we can.
Is there anything else we need to do on that right now, or?
I mean, I think this board, to your point, this board would like the precedent to be that you may not build something in town without an appropriate building permit signed by the board. And that you should not do any building activities before you have a proper and appropriate permit. That should be the expectation, and I think is the expectation. And so I don't think anybody would disagree with
I
that.
don't disagree with that. I will say that like with a lot of things that come across, come in front of us, we also use the professional guidance and opinions of the people who work for the town. And I think as far as last week goes, Kip explained his point of view on that, and so I was comfortable with where we were. That said, I agree with Paul, and I have the same concerns that have been expressed, that ideally it doesn't happen this way. But I guess it just speaks to a bigger issue that we have. Part of that has been addressed in ways with economic development discussions and planning board discussions and all that. So to the extent that we maybe need to have a big picture meeting on these kinds of things. And I know in the past, I think last year we talked to Kip, there was some discussion about whether Kip needed help in that office as far as monitoring and all that. So, it's a valid discussion, it's a valid concern, but I also, like I say, coming off of last week, I was like, okay, I trust that Kip feels like there's a course here that he's okay with, but I guess that's circling back after this is all over is going to be important, to make sure we all understand what went wrong and whether or not there's anything we can do before it happens again, which for all we know, sometimes things are happening already. Someone's building on a piece of property they're not supposed to, it's just that it's not on 125 where everyone can see it.
Right. And that's that's the nature of the beast, I think.
I do have a request, if the board is okay with this. What's the property with the multiple, like garage bays with the cupolas in front? It was gonna have the coffee.
Dave Roberts,
Yeah.
335.
I've been meaning to bring this up with this board for 2 months. Can we ask to have some sort of enforcement action so that there's not just garbage heaps on the side of 125 at the front of properties? Like it's a.
You're gonna have to define garbage use.
It's a garbage heap.
Is that the property that recently had a change of use to be carnival storage? Isn't it
Yes.
335 or 125, right?
That's such a.
When is that going
I
down?
think it should be active carnival.
Oh, I know he's purchased here. The planning board gave approval for the storage of carnival equipment, so
Right.
our action is over. As far as compliance with general debris issues, that's on you.
Should we have Kip go?
I
Take a look.
would just like there to not be literal piles of garbage, just because you put a free sign next to it. If it's a pile of garbage, it's a pile of garbage.
Is it there for long periods of time?
I've been meaning to bring this up for months.
But it's also not the only place, that's the
At that
problem.
one?
Yeah.
No, but if there are
Yeah.
other places, we shouldn't be allowing garbage piles on the side of 125 in our town. So,
Any road, really.
Yep.
agreed, but
Maybe Kip can do a
start
little,
where we can.
Kip can do a little drive-by and see. Whether he feels there's a-
And maybe, can be researched as to what kind of rules are there. We have a junkyard ordinance that speaks to what a junkyard is, but I don't believe that we have any kind of ordinance language that speaks to general junk. I totally agree with you, but I think it's something that Kip really can't do until there's language behind that in the town ordinance. Could be based as selectmen's ordinance.
Maybe there's something in state RSA that you can't, on a
State
state
road.
road, that you can't have a,
Oh, okay.
So Sounds like a really good question for Glenn tomorrow.
Ah, there we go. Let's kick the
I
can.
would just love for someone in the town to investigate that and figure out how we can make it
Maybe
so
we can
that
ask Glenn
that is
if
no
there's
longer
any
a situation.
applicable RSAs.
I'll start with
Pull
Glenn.
Okay,
the building permits out of the consent agenda, and it might be come up more quickly for you that somebody had concerns.
All right, Aaron.
Paul, any other committee or board business?
Oh, we have one.
Nope.
more thing.
Oh, wait, there was one more thing.
125, Sifter on the loan, the 3 piles of loan, and the people that came and requested the loud noise.
The rock
Oh, the
crushers,
rocks.
yeah.
Rocks. And the owner came over and said he'd like to extend it for a month and a half.
Just say no.
Well, it was, you were going to address that. Yeah, what did?
He's like, remind me what I was gonna.
He was here today, can I just give you an update where
Oh,
we are today?
Karen has an update.
So John Wilder was in the office today, he has a meeting, who is the tenant for 62 Route 125. Bernice LLC is the property owner. So from my understanding is the rock crusher has been removed from the property, which was the primary complaint that the LaRoches filed a couple weeks ago. John has an appointment to meet with Glenn Greenwood tomorrow to discuss his future intents and potentially an amendment to the site plan. And then him and I are gonna connect tomorrow after he meets with Glenn to see what further action needs to be coming so that he can update the select board on the status of that property if he's going to file any amendments.
And those amendments would go before the planning board.
Correct.
Thank you.
But he just wanted to update this board to close the loop on the complaint that was filed
Okay.
here.
So that the main issue of the complaint appears to have been resolved and continued to be resolved since that complaint, okay.
Well, at least
I think the primary question is like the loam screening and his hours of operation. I think his site plan requires him to stop work at 3 PM.
Which are not noise
Correct.
violation issues, so probably not relevant to the complaint that was made to us.
Correct.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks for cueing Paul from the peanut gallery. Anything else that you had for us, Paul?
That's it.
All right. He's like, I'm done. The only thing that I had is that I did get a message from Daphne that it's looking like, I'm quoting her, she said she was 80% sure that the New Hampshire primary will be on January 23rd, but we are waiting for official confirmation from New Hampshire Secretary of State. And this is because of all the hijinks going on with Iowa caucus and North Carolina and all of that stuff. So right now it's looking like January 23rd. I don't know, Letty, if you might sort of give the school board just a heads up that that's the tentative date.
Our next meeting is November.
It's not till
so
next month.
That's when
Yeah.
you'll be there to.
Yeah, and
tell your
it
stuff.
should be confirmed by then. So we can just wait till then. It should, I'm assuming it is going to be firmed up as soon as possible. I mean, I sure hope it is by the New
So
Hampshire. January 23rd is what it is looking like the primary date will be, which is very early, about 2 weeks earlier than it sometimes is. But we will certainly let